Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you again this week for another great podcast. It is so exciting. Can you believe we're already in the second quarter of 2021? Yes, the days, weeks, and months keep flying by, but really it's about charge. Create habits around real goals every day, because then you accomplish what you want to do each and every day. Today, I'm so excited to share with you a guest, Perry Marshall. He's one of the most expensive business strategists in the world. He is endorsed by Forbes and INC Magazine. He's guided clients like FanDuel and InfusionSoft from startup to hundreds of millions of dollars. He founded the 10 million Evolution 2.0 prize with judges from Harvard, Oxford, and MIT. Launched at the Royal Society in London, its world's largest science research award. NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs uses his 80-20 curve as a productivity tool, and his reinvention of the Pareto Principle is published in the Harvard Business Review. Perry's Google book laid the foundations for a $100 billion pay-per-click industry, and An Ultimate Guide to Google Ads is the world's best-selling book on internet advertising. Marketing maverick Dan Kennedy says, if you don't know who Perry Marshall is, unforgivable. Perry's an honest man in a field rife with charlatans. Perry has consulted in over 300 industries and has a degree in electrical engineering and lives in Chicago. And today he's our guest on the Charge Podcast. Welcome, Perry.
Thank you, Gary. Great to be here. It's a pleasure.
I'm glad I get to know you now, like Dan Kennedy says. So I'm excited. We haven't got to meet in person, but we're doing this via video, but you'll hear the audio podcast. And I have heard of your work. So we're going to talk about some of that. And I think we've got a lot of things that will really help our entrepreneurs, really what some of the things they may be struggling with, especially with your last book. But share with me, Perry, if you would. I think it always starts with a story. And of course, we see today and we hear those bios, but that was not where you were a few years back. Can you share a little bit of your journey?
Well, I'll give you a slice of my early entrepreneur career. When I was 14, I built a set of stereo speakers in shop class, and I was hooked. It was like, oh, I like building stereo equipment. This is awesome. And the only way to keep building stuff was to sell it. So I put an ad in the newspaper, and a guy came over and bought my speakers. And I remember my dad sitting with his newspaper, reading the newspaper as the guy walked out the door. And after the guy left, I came back in the house and Dad's like, woo, and Dad's being really cool about it when, before the guy leaves. Right. And fast forward about 3 or 4 years later, my dad had terminal cancer. He was in the hospital. I was a senior in high school, and I came in and I told him, Dad, I just started selling my speakers at a store. And then like that was another high five moment. And so now when I was doing that, this was what Michael Gerber would call a technician, not really an entrepreneur, right? Like, yep. This is just somebody who knows how to do something, and they've turned it into a business. And only later would I become an actual entrepreneur. And I would say really that was because I got laid off from an engineering job, went into sales, had couple years of bologna sandwiches and ramen soup and baked potatoes and salsa, if you catch my drift.
We all remember those days.
With a wife and a baby and spiraling credit card debt. And like, then I had to figure out marketing. And so it was the marketers that taught me real entrepreneurship. And so I guess that's a really short story.
Sure.
But I guess now entrepreneurs tend to go, oh yeah, technicians, yeah, that's nice. But, sometimes the point of being an entrepreneur is, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, probably 2/3 of the ones in my orbit, are really what I would call artists. Now, most people wouldn't use that word.
Right.
Okay. They're not like painting watercolors, right? Or they're not a gigging musician, but they are painting watercolors in a metaphorical sense, and they are a gigging musician. I mean, this is a gigging musician thing that we're doing right now, right? And most entrepreneurs I know are actually much more concerned with creating something that's valuable in the world. And they're much more concerned with the intrinsic value of whatever they create than they are with raking in lots of cash and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's true, even though many times you'll go to like a seminar or something and you've got people sort of peacocking about, their number, social signaling about their success and all that stuff. Even despite that, most entrepreneurs I know they're really trying to put something essentially good into the world, and they want the world to have it, and they want the world to discover what they've discovered, and like their talent is going to come out of them one way or another. They just want it to get harnessed to some good use. And so I think, and many times entrepreneurship is the only way that you actually have a chance to express that. Otherwise, you're just going to be like working for some insurance company.
Right. Well, and it becomes that passion, and they become the love of it. And that's why it becomes, to me, like you used the term of the artist. They want to be the artist of it because it's really a passion. It grows from within. I know I was in the wireless industry for 22 years, started out back in 1990 when it was in its infancy. And I'll be quite honest, when I lost my interest is when it became kind of you were supposed to follow this little box inside the box formula. Because I said I was an entrepreneur and I didn't like being in that formula. And I got out because of that reason. And I saw the industry changing and decided I needed to go do something else. So I followed a different passion to be able to move forward. And I think most entrepreneurs, you see that challenge in them is their business. They have to create something. They're creating it. I just did a Franklin Covey course this week and was talking about first creation is mental creation. We create it mentally first. Then we physically create it, like them speakers. At that time you were young, so you probably didn't think about it a lot, but you still had to mentally create it before you actually was able to create the final product.
Well, it was profoundly important that I mentally create it because I didn't have the money to screw it up. Right. So when you have to get it right the first time and you don't have the margin for error, then mentally getting it right on paper is 10 times more important than if, I got all the spare parts I need. If this doesn't work, I'll just try it again. In fact, that's why I ended up going to school in engineering, because being good at engineering was the only way to make sure that it actually came out right, as any wireless guy would know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's so interesting because it kind of leads me into, number one, you've wrote a book about this, but really a thought that I've really been having, and I'm reading another book right now that's Lead Yourself First, talking about solitude. And one of the challenges we're having, not only as business owners, so we're speaking to everyone here, even if you're not a business owner, there's so much saturated social media, news media, the technology that, to be quite honest, we're unable to think, and we're not doing any solitude. So how do you see that really the challenge that it creates for us, and it really creates for our world? Because if we don't have time to think, we can't do those mental creations then.
3,000 years ago, Solomon said, where words are many, transgression is inevitable. Okay. And so if you're in a world where there's this external force that says, come on, give me more words, give me more words, give me, like, say something, like, post something, like something, tweet something. You inevitably are 80% living in the trivial, and not to mention all of the polarization and all of that. Yeah. And I would say the best habit that I have developed in the last 10 years, really the best habit I've developed in my life, which started about 7 or 8 years ago, was starting my day with a pen and a notebook and a cup of coffee instead of anything electronic. And I do this every day. I haven't missed a day in 7 years. And it's the most important thing I do. Pray, listen, meditate, gratitude, plan, think, have space. And most people are so conditioned. You got to really think about this. Most people have been conditioned literally since childhood to look busy.
Mm-hmm.
Look busy, right? As long as nobody can tell that you're not working, then you appear to be working. And as long as you're working, you're a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember a comment somebody made to me made me realize that what I believed was that as long as Perry's working hard, he's not a bad guy. Okay. And despite the fact the work that I was doing at the time was completely unproductive, I was accomplishing nothing, and I knew it. So I just worked harder to compensate for the lack of success. It's like, well, I guess I'm not a bad guy now. Like, I worked 14 hours today. And so most people will feel guilty if you're sitting in your favorite chair, or let's say in your backyard or your patio or your garden, or you go to the park and you're having what I call Renaissance time. Most people will feel guilty because they're not hustling the kids out the door. They're not answering emails. They're not phone call. They have a physiological reaction. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be like typing on a keyboard or texting with my thumbs or talking on the phone, or surely I should be listening to something or reacting to something. Like, no.
So tell me then, because I know people, and the interesting thing is, at the end, I'm going to ask you a question about habits, and we'll make you pick another one. But let's really dive into that, because you said 7 or 8 years you really kind of laid into that. How has that process worked for you? Because it is the number one answer, Perry, that I get when I ask the question of charge, create habits around real goals every day. What habit has made the biggest impact on your life? And you've kind of told us now this last 7 or 8 years has. So show someone, how can they, number one, get started? Because sometimes when we say this, I think their worry is they think it means for you, I don't know what time it is, but for myself this morning, it was an hour for me, that my time block ahead for that. And the time is not as important as starting the habit. So have you seen a progression in your morning routine?
Yes. Okay. So let's start with what you don't do. Okay. So, worst possible way to start your day. Ring, 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 ring. Alarm. Pull device into bed and start the death scroll.
Yes.
Okay. That is the worst way to start your day. Why? Because it gets you reacting. First of all, like if you start on social media or news, it's immediate dump of negativity about, not only is it negative, 99.9% of his stuff you can't do anything about. Okay. So it's disempowering. Like, you're really going to start the first 15 seconds of your day going into disempowerment. You don't think this is going to affect everything else you do today? Okay, so like you don't do any of that. And what I learned to do was free write. Now, I'm not real dogmatic about exactly how you want to do this, okay? But what works for me is if I sit down with my notebook and go, and here's like the rule, if you will. If you're pushing the pencil or pen, like when you write copy or a blog post, you are doing it wrong. You are not composing. You're not, if you're trying to string words together in some particular way, you are doing it wrong. It should be whatever is like on the edge of your consciousness and whatever just flows through your arm, that's what you write. Okay, I had a dream, I had an idea in the shower, I'm in a bad mood today, I'm in a good mood today, my arm hurts, I had a really great checkers game with my 6-year-old like last night, whatever, right? Or what's my biggest question today? Like, okay, look at my schedule. Like I'll look at my calendar, I'll do stuff like that, but I'm not interacting with anybody.
Right.
And like, oh, I got this podcast interview with Gary Welbers at 9:00 today, and he wants to know what's the best habit I developed. What do I really want to talk to him about? Like, what story should I tell that will illustrate this? And I have time and space to do that. So this is you said an hour. For me, it's 1 to 2. And I don't stop until I just know that I'm done. And see, most people, they logically think that this is like somehow impossible. But what they don't know is that if you delete the social media apps off of your phone, you will be amazed at how much time you actually have.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing more, there's nothing more important than space. Now let's make a really clear distinction about something here. So let's think about industrial revolution. Okay, think about, all right, the world went from farms and blacksmiths to factories and all that, right? And it's like, okay, so now we got to get people busy. Now, if you want to use 21st century terminology to describe what people started doing in the Industrial Revolution, they started being like algorithms, right?
Yes.
Like, okay, so, and what an algorithm does, it does the same thing every time, right? If you type plumber into Google and you search, you'll get a result. And if you search again, you'll get the exact same result. And until something changes, right? It'll just be right. And you get that consistency. Now that we have algorithms and robots and all of that, being an algorithm, looking busy, not valuable anymore.
Yep.
In fact, might be worthless. The only valuable thing you do now is think about a better way to solve a problem. And it doesn't matter if you got the better way on the internet or the library or you invented it, but everybody who's really, every entrepreneur who's really accepting their role in the world, you're in the business of coming up with new solutions to problems, which means you're in the business of thinking. And here's the point. The only way to think is to have space to think.
Yeah.
You cannot think if you are running as fast as you can on a hamster wheel, looking as busy as you know how to look. You're not thinking. And so like you have to completely like giant red reset button. You just have to completely, you have to reset your very notion of productivity. Productivity is not getting things done. I know there's a book by that title, and it's a good book, and it's a well-intentioned and everything, and there's goodness to that. Productivity is not getting things done. Yeah. It's not how many things you checked off. You know what productivity really is? What one thing could I do if I did it by 10 o'clock this morning? If I did this one thing, I could honestly justify taking the whole rest of the day off. That's productivity.
Right. Yeah, that is a great point. And I think the key is really getting people to realize you've got to slow down. And you're going to have to create the space, as we've talked about, be able to create it. And you've kind of really shared that. And I know you have a book out, but let's just talk a little bit about that, because now it's about, we have them thinking. Now, how do you do it? So your book was Detox, Declutter, and Dominate. And you pinpoint kind of 7 principles that always work and are always true in business. And it's going to be valid, kind of the timeless principles that Stephen Covey did in the 7 Habits is the way I take it.
Yes.
Would you say it's going to be practical today, but even 50 years from today? I have not got to read it yet, Perry, but I will be picking it up and reading it, because this topic really interests me, because I talk about positive culture and I really talk about individuals, how they can create that. So share with me, we may not have time to cover each principle, but let's go into a couple that you really want to share. And if you kind of how you want to break that down, but in the book, how do you break that down to detox, declutter, and dominate with those 7 principles?
Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that book, these are 7 things. They are all principles. They're not techniques. They're still going to be valid in 50 years. I mean, how old is that book? 30 years old?
Yeah.
However old it is, he's gone now. That, but it's still true. It's still valid. People still talking about it, right? So this is in the same vein, but this is kind of straddling. It's somewhat lifestyle strategy, and it's mostly business strategy. And so the first step is what we just got done talking about, Renaissance time, and how you start your day. Second step, make your business twice as profitable with 80-20 focus. In fact, they're all on the back cover of the book. Okay, so 80-20 focus, the 80-20 principle says that 80% of your productivity comes from 20% of what you do, and 80% of what you do only gets you 20% of what you get. And so that immediately means there is a constant cycle of pruning of things that you're deciding not to do. And again, we're pushing against that look busy thing.
Yep.
Like, no, like there's, in fact, usually 10% of what most people are doing is moving them backwards, making them less money, hindering their sales, reducing their profits. 80-20 is how you fix that. Number 3, earn $1,000 an hour at least 1 hour a day with 80-20 time. Now, most people, they think $1,000 an hour. Aren't we arguing about whether people should get 15? What's that about? No, I'm totally serious. And here's why. Okay, you've got Helen, and she works at a dentist office. She's a receptionist, and she makes $15 an hour. And the phone rings. Wooddale Dental, please hold. And 2 minutes later, she comes back and they're gone. They were going to spend $5,000 on crown work, but they disappeared. Helen lost $5,000 of business in 2 minutes. That's $150,000 an hour for 2 minutes.
Right.
A $15 an hour person loses $150,000 an hour by not being attentive to the fact that time, see, the value of time is not 15 versus 12 versus 16 versus $18. The value of time is 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, $100,000 an hour, literally. And the whole success of the dentist practice revolves on what happens in 1% of the time that is used by all of the team members. Number 4, create an irresistible product that's a joy to use by simplifying. Now, I don't have time to go into this. If you truly do this, you will become number 1 in your market because you have made something simpler than any competitor has made it. And that's the definition of how you become the best. Okay, number 5, carve out the niche where you're the undisputed number 1 in via the star principle. Most people do not realize that if you're not number 1 in any game, it's usually not even worth playing. You have to have a definitive selling proposition that literally you are the only person on earth who can do that for those people at this time and at this place. And most people say yes to way too many things where they have no chance of being number 1. And that's why they don't make any money.
Yeah.
Number 6, build an impenetrable moat around your business. The moat is more important than the castle.
That's what protects the castle.
The moat is what protects the castle. If you have a moat around your castle, even if it's a little dinky castle, you will have time and space to think and create and to do the things that you want to do. And you won't have spears like coming at you all the time. But if there's no competitive barrier to entry to what you do, your castle, they're going to steal it. And you're going to lay awake all night and you're going to have sleep with one eye open. It's miserable. Okay. Number 7, enjoy freedom to create, invent every single day. Now that's actually a variation of Renaissance time, which is step 1, but how's it different? Your recreation and your outside interests. First of all, you need to, the biggest reason to clear away the clutter, to declutter your life, is so that you have time to do this, because this is what feeds the engine, especially the creative engine that does the thinking. Mm. Most people's creative engine is so worn out. The oil hasn't been changed in 15,000 miles. There's not enough radiator fluid. You know, it's in bad shape. And then like, okay, Gary, you're going to have to think like really hard about this problem, and it's got to be solved by 3 o'clock. And you're like, because you were already wrung, like twisted tight like a dish rag. And you're like, oh, now I have to do more. And this is how most people are. So like you use 80-20, you clear your deck, and then you make space like, okay, I've got time to go to a concert. I've got time to push my kid on a swing in a park. How many times have you got like a seriously good idea while you're pushing your kid on a swing?
Right.
I have, like a bunch of times. So those are the 7 steps of Detox, Declutter, Dominate.
Well, that is a book everyone needs to check out. I wished we could get deeper on that, but I think we set it up where they really understand that space, this Renaissance time, as you call it, is so important to us. And the question that I'm going to come back to one more time and kind of a short side of it, tell me, for someone that's sitting there, they hearing us, but how did they get started? What would you be suggesting for them? Because they're not doing it now. So now they're doing the rush game and they're saying, boy, that sounds really good, but I don't have time. And then I'll lead into that after you get done, and then we'll go into the recharge round. So
sit down with a notebook and a pen and go and start writing like whatever comes. Now, here's like a spiritual twist to that. I call it the head office. Ask the head office a question and write whatever comes. Do not edit. Do not think. Do not sit there and wonder whether this is just me or my imagination or my subconscious. I don't care. In some sense, in the immediate sense, it doesn't even matter. You just have to get it flowing. It's like going into an old house nobody's lived in for 6 months and turning on the water and like nothing happens, and then right, and then all this rust comes out. It's just like that. Like you have to get it going. And a friend messaged me yesterday, and she said, in C.S. Lewis's The Screw Tape Letters, which is an old classic book,
Yes.
advice given from an older devil to a younger devil about how to best destroy the human. He tells the younger devil, if you find your human prays to heaven, think nothing of it, don't worry. Though, if you find he's listening, well then act immediately, or you really will have cause for panic. And what I'm really suggesting you do is cultivate the ability to listen by just letting the words flow through. You can decide tomorrow or the next day or the week after that whether it was just a bad burrito or it was really the head office. You can figure that out later. Your job right now is just get it flowing.
That becomes the key. And it really fits with declutter, as we've talked about. Declutter and decide to start. When my alarm went off at 4:50 this morning, the choice was to get out of bed, to give myself that time, because I know the rest of my day is set with some podcast interviews and with other things that's on that calendar. But I have to find that time, and that becomes the real key. That becomes in our philosophy of habit. Charge, create a habit around real goals every day that allows you to do it. But you have to change something to make that happen. And I would recommend everyone, I will be going out to get the book, Detox, Declutter, Dominate. Please check it out by Perry Marshall. We'll have it in show notes for you. So you can get to the link to be able to purchase the book. But remember, if you're driving, you're exercising right now, that I do sometimes when I listen to podcasts, we'll have all that in show notes at chargepodcast.com. Perry, some great conversation. I think we could go on for several hours because you and I have similar philosophies and some things that I'm reading now. And I'll be honest, I'm not totally there yet. And I need to do more. You really helped me with some of the free write. And I will be trying that and working on getting better at that. So I truly appreciate it.
Are all not totally there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. You're never there, but I'm not where I'm doing the free write. I'm forcing it too much. So that's the point. You know, I'm writing, but I'm forcing it. And I love the philosophy that you gave me there to really be able to open that up. Well, the first one, of course, you've kind of touched on, but I'm going to ask you maybe share a different one or share off of that, is the charge. Create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think for you, besides your Renaissance time now and your free thinking, what is something else that's really helped you really kind of have that success or propel the life that you really want to have in life?
So a major daily habit is, what am I not going to do? Which many times is, what am I going to delegate? And I have a personal assistant, and I don't think she has a particularly easy job. Okay. But like I am constantly, and we've been working together for 10 years. So like I am constantly inching up the bar on how little I do and how much gets, passed on to other people. And most highly conscientious, salt of the earth people have a very hard time with this, because they've heard all of the little lectures about servant leadership, and which is very egalitarian, which is good. But if you're going to be in your talent zone of doing the thing that only you can do, then if somebody else can do it, you shouldn't be. And you have to shed the guilt of moving that to somebody else. This is how jobs are created. This is how economies are created. And you have to overcome your reluctance, because I know there's this, your mother's in your head. You got to make your own bed, and you got to tie your own shoes, and you got to, and all. Yeah, I know. But there comes a point where maybe you don't make your own bed, and maybe you don't empty your own garbage, and maybe you don't shovel your own snow. And like, you have to adopt a philosophy. If this doesn't energize me, I shouldn't be doing it. And it's a major mental shift. And most people have lots of head trash around that. Well, get out your broom and start sweeping out the head trash and like get on with it, because it is so important that you really be doing your groove.
Okay, great. Share with me, I call it a simple positive action. I kind of an acronym with SPA about what's a simple positive action you take each day to be able to move forward to achieve your goals.
One of my dear mentors who died a few years ago told me, he said, Perry, every day, every morning, you need to greet your kids by saying hello to them and making eye contact. Now, obviously, that's a nice thing to do. But he said, no, go out of your way. Make sure that happens every day because it makes them feel grounded in the world. They don't even notice necessarily that I do this. But a very interesting thing happened. COVID hit. And my 19-year-old son, best friend, moved in with us because his mom, long story, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't go live with his mom. So we have Justin living with us for 5 months. Okay, well, COVID's interesting, right? Maybe 2 months in, Caden comes up and he goes, Dad, you know how you say hello to Justin every morning? Hello, Justin. I go, yeah. And he goes, he really likes it when you do that. It just makes him, it feels so fatherly to him. And, you know, his relationship with his dad isn't all that great. And I thought, okay, Tom taught me to do that. I habitually do it to all the kids in the house. And now I'm doing it to the 19-year-old Justin. And he's responding exactly the way that Tom told me he would. So that's a little 10-second habit that will reap rewards for your kids and your family for a very long time.
Yeah. And anyone that's listening, pick up any of those type of things, you will make a difference. I've got into the habit of sitting my kids when they were in high school. I didn't do it in grade school because we didn't give them phones. Even though I was in the wireless industry, I would send them a positive message. And one of my daughter's friends said, tell your dad to send me that. So then I would put her on my list and I'd send her that positive message, you know, and it's things we just think are so small, but for others, it makes them feel so big. So that becomes the key. Love that. Thank you, Perry. How about your biggest life lesson? What did you learn from it?
One of the biggest ones was when I was 21, I got into Amway. And I spent 6 years spinning my wheels. Remember that where I said I was working, and accomplished nothing? Yeah, that was it. That was like a giant crater of unproductivity. And I remember after I signed up, it occurred to me, you know, Perry, before you did this, you didn't actually pray about it. And I'm like, well, yeah, we'll fix that later or something. I don't know what I was thinking. But I think that anytime you make any kind of major decision or even a minor decision, you should consult the head office. And I realize different people have very different ways of expressing this. And that's, you know, I'm comfortable with all that. But like, you got to check in with the inner wisdom, or you might find yourself going down some very long dirt roads that you really could have avoided. And yeah, that would be a major good answer to that question.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing. And Perry Marshall, it has been an honor to have you on the Charge podcast. And you've given our chargers so many different things to think about for their life. And that becomes the real key. That's why they listen. Now it's about taking action. That's going to be the challenge that they have. Don't pick 4 or 5, pick one that Perry talked about, find that, and then move forward in that each and every day. Perry, before we go, share with them how they can reach out to you if they want, and anything about the book that you'd like to share. And I'm sure they can find some of that information on the website. But
you can get the book on Amazon. Detox, Declutter, Dominate. It's about $9 in the US. If you go to perrymarshall.com and scroll down, there's a email course called the 30-Day Street MBA. And if you liked what you heard today, then that 30-day street MBA will absolutely be right up your alley, and it will keep you moving forward with very actionable ideas and probably things that you can stop doing. Every entrepreneurs are always talking about action and implementation and actually doing stuff. How about not doing some stuff?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Chargers, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and I thank you for coming in and listening each and every week. Please remember, like and share our podcast. That's how others get to learn about it. And if you like this podcast, maybe send it to a friend or someone that you know is struggling in one of those areas, and maybe they want to detox, declutter, and dominate in their life. Thank you for joining us, Chargers. We'll see you back here next week at the same time. Make it a great day.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.